Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I am Aaron, and this is the Inclusive Dad podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me in exploring ways we can create a more inclusive world together. You are important, you matter, and you can make a difference. Today, my guest is Stephanie Fluger. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, very happy to talk to you guys and share what I have, all my stories.
Thank you. Why don't you just start me off by telling me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like said, my name's Stephanie. I have a very unique but similar experience to I know a lot of parents that are here. My son, he was diagnosed autistic when he was kind of on the younger side. He was 20 months old, but we started our therapy journey when he was 16 months old. Shockingly enough, we flunked out of physical therapy. Didn't know that was a thing that you could do, but we flunked out and told that maybe we weren't ready for it. While we were on the wait list for speech therapy, we were eventually called, went through speech therapy. Speech therapist told us that we needed OT, got on with OT, all those different things. Diagnosed with autism and kind of started down that journey, added on ABA, and through all of these different things, I got a lot of experiences with clinics, with programs, with things like that. And I realized that a lot of these programs do not actually support parents and they don't support the families. And as much as they provide therapies for the kids, I felt as though that it was either just running through all of the kids, or it just felt like we were part of the system and no one actually saw my son. No one actually saw me. No one helped me try to figure out this crazy world that when you say, oh, I want to be a parent, I'm so excited. They prep you like you're not going to sleep or bottle feeding or all the things. No one tells you what you're in for when it's like your kid's delayed. You need speech. No one tells you about any of that. And so when you get thrown into this world, it is terrifying. And the terrifying part isn't the fact that you need therapy or your kiddo needs therapy. The terrifying part is the unknown, and there's no roadmap. So kind of getting back to the question about who I am and me, I decided to open up a clinic because there is no roadmap and there should be. And so I own Connection Therapy Clinic, and that is my passion, where we help support parents and we help support the therapist and we guide everybody through that very beginning step. And we help the families, and we are very inclusive, and we are neurodivergent-affirming, and we are play-based, and it is all the things that it really should be, because I come from that perspective that I've been through it. I know what it feels like from that other side, being a parent of the unknown and what my kid needs. And it's really scary.
Yeah. So are you a therapist by training, or what's
No, okay. I am not at all. I am just a mom who been through it in the weeds, and I was like, this is ridiculous. And I've heard too many stories. I know that I'm sure if we took a sample of all of the listeners, all of you that are out there right now, of how many clinics have you been through that have treated you in this very similar way, where you just felt like a number, where you just were not listened to, where you're talking to a therapist or you're talking to the clinic, and you're trying to tell them, at home, my kid, he's so frustrated and he's throwing his Hot Wheels toy at me, and I'm how do I tell him it's not okay, but he's not understanding it's not okay. And the therapist looks at you and goes, well, it would be ideal if they didn't throw the Hot Wheels toy at you. And you look at the therapist and you're like, yes, thank you for that. That's a great nugget of knowledge. They're not hearing you. And I'm like, this is not helpful. We need to hear parents and support parents.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. The first question I usually ask is, what is your definition of inclusion?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and inclusion, and I know this is a very generic answer, but when I think about inclusion, the most basic answer I can come up with is just the purest of acceptance, because it just accept who I am, and that is, or who my son is, and who we are when we come to something. When, for example, the most inclusive environment I've ever been with, and follow me on this, is I went to my brother's wife's family, so my sister-in-law's family's house, and with my son and my daughter. So my son, he's autistic. My daughter, she's neurotypical. And they were wonderful. My sister-in-law's family, they got all my son's safe foods. They did everything that they possibly could. But as we know, when our autistic or neurodivergent kiddos are in a new environment, new people, 90% of the time, their safe foods don't even apply. They don't eat. They don't do all those things.
Right.
So, of course, they try to present all the safe foods to my son, and he's not eating. Well, in most situations, when you're in that, you're like in a new person's house, you're trying to present or something like that. You would be embarrassed or try to get they were so understanding. They were so wonderful. They're like, no, that's okay. Like, it was no pressure. It was just pure acceptance. Or my son, when he stims, it's a little bit different of a stim where he kind of just like runs around and sprints. He seems like he's this crazy child who just like runs in a circle. But there was no nothing to it. They were just like, go do. Like it was just this pure level of acceptance. And that is what inclusion should be. Inclusion should be just do as you need to do to participate in whatever activity it is.
Yeah, that's a great definition.
Yeah, thank you.
So growing up, did you have any experience with like disability or autism? For my story, I don't remember any like experience with disability or hearing the word or seeing anybody with disability. So when my daughter was born, I had to learn it all. Just curious about you.
Yeah. So as I was a kid, I didn't have, growing up, directly any experience with disability. I myself, I have celiac disease. So I was diagnosed with celiac disease when I was 8 years old. So I had it when I was young. And so I had a little bit of a learning disability myself. And then as I've gotten older and through my son's diagnosis, I myself am not diagnosed, but as I learn a lot about autism, I feel like I am a very high masker, low support needs autistic.
Sure.
Just with how much I've learned about girls on the spectrum and how high masking they are. There are certain things that I'm like, oh, yep, that's me. Yep, that one's me. Oh, that one too. That one's me. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that there are pieces of that. I think there are people in my family that I've also recognized a lot of similarities from my son to family members. So I think I've been around it a lot, but there's never been like a label associated to it. But also we're in a very different world now where I think having a label, if you will, I know that's kind of a bad name to it, but having that association isn't as detrimental now as it was 20, 30 years ago.
Yep. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you brought up something interesting. I've had a number of guests on recently where they talked about that, like where somebody close to them has been diagnosed with autism or something, and they start researching it, and they're like, either themselves realize they have autism, get tested and confirm it, or somebody else close to them, shares they have it and didn't talk about it before. So it's interesting how that kind of happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because they say that autism or some type of neurodivergence is 100% genetic. It gets passed down. And it's funny because people will be like, oh, your kid isn't autistic. But then it's like, oh yeah, but grandpa had like this crazy stamp collection and had to sit in this one specific chair and had to have their picture frames in a particular way. And you're like, let's think about that for a quick second.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
So why do you think so many parents feel dismissed in therapy spaces, and what do we need to change?
Yeah. So that's a big question. That is a very loaded, multi-leveled question. And I think everybody has a different answer to that. For me personally, it really, and I kind of alluded to it a little bit in the beginning with the Hot Wheels example. So I'll tell you my story. And this was like the final straw that broke the camel's back on why I created Connection. I was in an ABA program, or my son was in an ABA program, which I know there's a whole, we'll put ABA conversation on the shelf. We'll put that one on the shelf. But we were in this program and they were forcing this parent training. And I'm all in support of parent training if it's going to be supportive and helpful for my son and for me. But the parent training was like a workbook. It was watching YouTube videos, and it wasn't even applying to the challenges that we were going through. And I would talk to this BCBA, and a BCBA, if you don't know, is the actual therapist, the person who has like the master's program, who structures the entire like program for your kiddo. And then there's like the RBT, who's the person who actually implements the one-on-one therapy with your kiddo. So I'm working with the master's BCBA, and she's trying to like have me do these workbook questions. And then she's asking me about very specific questions, like what is an antecedent strategy? And these are like very BCBA terms. And I'm like, I gotta be honest, I don't care. Like, I want you, and again, going back to that example, I want you to tell me, how do I reprimand my son for throwing a Hot Wheels toy at his sister when he can't comprehend that that's not a good thing, when he can't verbalize he's frustrated?
Right.
And she looked at me and gave me that answer, like, well, it would be good if he didn't throw the Hot Wheels toy. And I'm like, okay, I hear you. Yes, thank you. But you're not helping me. Like, I don't want to know what an antecedent into whatever the word was strategy. I want to know, how can I help my son? How can I help him with his frustration? How can I also teach him that this is not okay to throw a toy?
Right.
And that's just like a small example of what I feel like all of us parents experience, where we're desperate for help. We are so alone in this, and it's just such an isolating experience being a parent of an autistic kiddo, of being a parent of a neurodivergent kiddo, whatever that diagnosis is, that you feel like there's nowhere for you to go for help and support. And you go to your therapist thinking that they have all the answers.
Right.
And sometimes the hard part is these therapists are also sometimes young with no kids of their own.
Yeah.
And the only experience they have is from a workbook. And they don't know what it's like to be with these kiddos 24/7. And it's just such, I mean, I just always go back to it. It's very isolating and it's very lonely. And we don't get that input back that we need from these therapists.
Yeah. So what kind of thing do you do at your therapy clinic to kind of help with that part, or try to, be more parent friendly?
So one piece is, that's my whole component of bringing to the clinic. So I told you I'm not a therapist myself.
Yep.
So that is kind of my branch within the clinic. Is we have speech therapy, we have occupational therapy, and then we have parent support. So I bring in the parent support and I do the hand holding for the parents. I bring in a lot of the parent coaching because I've done it, I've been in it, as well as I do train my therapists. I make sure my therapists understand that they know how to listen to the parents and that we're not just going off of what goals the therapists think that they should be from the reports, but we're actually having conversations with parents. What are you having challenges with at home? What are the struggles at home? And we're constantly checking with the parents to make sure that even if, let's say, we're seeing gross motor challenges here, but then mom and dad are saying, oh, but we're struggling at home with dressing, or we're struggling at home with feeding, then it's like, all right, gross motor is like putting on the shelf. We're going to go switch and we're going to go to this, because the gross motor doesn't matter at this point because your challenges are this. And so we shift, and it's those kind of things that I think are missed in a lot of other clinics.
Yeah. So like the parent support piece, is that something you can like bill insurance for, or how do you get around that kind of stuff?
So right now, a lot of the parent support stuff is I just do. I don't bill.
Yeah.
I just do. It's normally as the parents come in and they're sitting here waiting for the kids, I'm sitting at the front desk and I'm available to talk to parents.
Sure.
I do offer, if you're not here in the clinic, I do offer hourly sessions. So you can definitely message me, and I do hourly sessions. We also have a Calendarly. If you don't know, that's an online system where you can schedule with me immediately for sessions like that. But unfortunately, that's not something that can be built. That is a private pay thing.
Yeah. The reason I asked that question is one of the things I do is some part-time do some adult rehabilitative mental health services. So there's certain things you can like do and bill for and certain things you can't. And then it seems like sometimes the stuff that's like most needed is the stuff you can't bill for, unfortunately. So how do you slip some of that stuff in-ish when you know what I mean? So just how can you kind of slip it in while you're doing the other stuff? So
yeah, definitely. It's really hard. I mean, so I'm in Southern California.
Okay.
And so there's a trend here that I'm noticing, and actually in all in California, because I lived in Northern California for a little bit, that all clinics are doing away with insurance. I'm not sure if that's what you see where you're at, but most of the clinics here are all going to private pay, which I personally have a hard time doing that. I adamantly, when we decided to open up a clinic, because I partnered with my OT and my speech therapist, my son's speech and OT therapist, and opened this clinic, I was like, we're going insurance because it's hard. You can't go private pay and ask the average person to pay $3,000 a month for necessary services for your kids. So we accept insurance for speech and for OT services. And then we do things like my coaching that we do on the side, or we're going to be opening up a preschool an inclusive preschool in September. And we do these kind of things to try to at least compensate for for being able to accept insurance. But we are one of the very few Southern California clinics that accept insurance. Wow. It's hard. It's a hard situation.
Yeah, that's tough. Cause I mean, I also will help parents with like IEP stuff, and it's like that's the hardest part is like I want to help everybody because they need it, but I have to charge something to be able to like pay my bills and live. So it's how do you balance that stuff?
Exactly. And that's the struggle, because we know, being parents of neurodivergent kids, we understand the struggle, but then at the same time, it's like we also have to pay for our own kids' therapies and somehow have to be able to pay those bills. So it's a struggle balance.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of fathers coming in with their kids? Or, I mean, my experience is if I go to like meetings or go to any like doctor appointments or any conferences, it's largely like the mothers that are there. Do you see a lot of dads coming in with their kids to therapy and wanting to learn and help out?
Actually, I have to say I'm seeing a lot of grandparents, and I'm seeing a good amount of fathers coming in. So it's really nice to see a good mix. Obviously, there is a majority of moms. But there's also, I want to say, a good 35% mix of dads and grandfathers coming in also and taking an active role. Like just yesterday, I had a grandfather asking me like, okay, now explain to me, what is OT? What does it do? How is it going to help my grandson? And he, like, from a genuine wanting to understand, because it's just such a foreign concept of what is OT and why are we doing this kind of a thing. And it's just beautiful to see this change. And they're so committed. I mean, this kiddo comes in at least twice a week, and it's just great to really see. And I love that you asked that question, because when I started taking my son, it was all moms, always all moms. But now it's kind of a little bit of a shift of kind of everybody's involved.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You're outspoken about therapy models that focus too much on compliance rather than actually supporting the child. Can you break down what a neurodivergent-affirming therapy approach looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the stuff that we do is play-based and child-led. Now, child-led does not mean that we say, all right, go into the gym and go run around and go do, with no direction and with no therapy. Because obviously our kiddos are here because it serves a purpose. But we're also not going to tell our kiddos to come in and, all right, we're going to sit down. We're going to do handwriting. We're going to dictate every single step. And then as we do every single step, you're going to get a star and a token and X, Y, and Z. That is a very compliance, external driven reward system. What we want our kids to do is we want them to be excited to come here. We want them to feel comfortable and be ready to play with us. Like when they're coming into therapy, every single one of my therapists go, okay, are you ready to come play? It's not, all right, let's go back and let's get to work. It's, let's go play. Like my speech therapist, we don't have a speech room. We just have our play area. And if our kids want to go do speech in the sensory gym, they go to speech on the swing in the sensory gym. But kind of going back to that compliance and direction and child play or child led is, for example, my OT will be like, okay, let's figure out what we want to do today. And we'll do a schedule. You'll pick one thing first, and then maybe I'll pick another thing. And a kid might go, oh, I want to go on the swing. Great. So our therapist will write down the swing. And then my therapist would suggest, okay, how about we do an obstacle course? And then our therapist would choose an obstacle course because that would obviously be working on maybe some gross motor, some fine motor, hand-eye coordination and things like that. Then the kiddo could pick another activity like Play-Doh or something like that. And it goes back and forth. So it's child-led, but still structured. And the kiddos don't realize that they're still doing therapy, but they're able to kind of control the environment.
Right. Now, that makes a lot of sense. When you were talking, I was thinking about my daughter. So my daughter's name is Cecilia. She's 22, but when she was in school, she had PT, OT, speech, vision, all this stuff. And it's like, okay, if she's getting pulled out for all these things, like she's not going to be in class at all. So how can we like incorporate like, you know, PT, OT stuff in like just a normal daily routine where they're getting it instead of pulling them out? So it's, how do you guys work with parents to like give them things, hey, these are things you can do that'll help their speech or, you know, OT at home, that you don't necessarily like pull them into this room and, hey, we're working in OT right now?
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely. So we are not necessarily in school. So we are outside clinic. And one thing that I was pretty adamant about when we started the clinic and as I train my therapists that come in is we don't do homework because I got to be honest, my son doesn't do homework. My son doesn't take demands from me. Like in his IEP, I'm like, listen, homework is not happening. So whatever you need to do in the IEP to write down that he's not going to get like lower grades or whatever it is, homework's not happening because I have to regulate him for the 4 hours I have for him to behave for you. Because he's like manic when he gets home. So if you want him to behave in school, do not expect any homework to happen. So that is when the kids come here for therapy, I'm like, there's no homework, so don't send homework. But when we come here, if parents are like, listen, my kiddo needs help with like handwriting or they do have homework, then we tell them, feel free to bring it in here because we could get it done. We could like work with them. If they have some math homework, we could be like, okay, here, do one problem here or somehow incorporate it into the activities we're doing or somehow maybe do it verbally and our therapist would write it for them and like kind of take some of the demands out of it. Like I know when I attempted homework once or twice, that's how my therapist would do it is they would do math verbally with my son and then they would write the answer for him because it just kind of limits some of those demands. So we sometimes try to incorporate it that way and I don't know why. I mean, I do know why it requires resources, but school should be able to implement that a little bit as well.
Absolutely. For parents who feel completely lost, what's the first thing you want them to know?
Take a breath. I know that's easier said than done. I know 100% easier said than done. But taking a breath, and that's what we tell our kids, right? Whenever they're like they're in their meltdown and they're having that hard time, we either tell them to take a breath or we give them a deep compression hug, don't say anything, and we just take the deep breath hug and hope that they start mimicking our deep breaths. And like that once you can kind of regulate yourself and then start to make the list, when you can physically write down everything that's going on in your brain and put it on paper, then at least you have your map and your way forward. Because when you can physically see it, then you know where to go. There's nothing more terrifying than the unknown, like I said in the very beginning of our conversation.
Right.
So when it's known, then at least you have your action plan.
Right. That's great. You talked before about faith playing a role in your parenting, but it hasn't always been easy to do that with your child. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and what other parents in similar situations might relate to?
Yeah. So I was always brought up extremely religious. I was brought up somewhere between like Orthodox and like conservative and like just a very religious individual. And I thought, back in the beginning when, you're thinking kids and sleepless nights and all that, I thought I would raise my kids very religious and things like that. Like I used to do Friday night dinners were very important to us, and I thought I would be doing the same things and my kids would be going to like Sunday school and things like that. Well, that's not exactly how it turns out, because Sunday school is a whole nother set of demands for my son. I can't put him in another set of schooling. And sometimes when we try to do Friday night dinners, doing prayers and things like that, again, another set of demands, another set of expectations. And it breaks my religious heart. But at the same time, I have to see what's better for my son versus what's better for like my spiritual heart. And I have to understand that hopefully God would forgive me and understand that I have to put my son first. And if my son isn't happy, and if he's getting stressed out over something that is spiritual or I'm supposed to be doing for my religious beliefs, but he's like in the corner and I'm almost forcing him, then what's the point of doing it?
Right.
And it's been this struggle for me to kind of almost let go and just follow his lead. And ever since I've let go, I've noticed he kind of takes a little bit more of an interest. So like I'll do a couple things here and there that I think he'll enjoy. Mm-hmm. And then it's kind of like incrementally seeping in a little bit, but it's been really hard for me, being a very spiritual, very observant person, to not be able to honor and celebrate my heritage and my background.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I grew up Baptist, so I was in church every time the doors were open. So I grew up at church all the time. So my daughter, she likes going to church, but she uses a wheelchair. She has seizures, so you have the whole thing about finding a place that's accessible, and then she goes into a class. You need to make sure that you tell them a little bit about if she has a seizure, or we're going to be here if you need us, come get us. So there's still like different things like that where you still have, it makes it a little more complicated, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Where you've been raised this way, you kind of want to carry that on, and then it doesn't necessarily work out that way. So that makes a lot of sense.
It's a really tough transition.
Yeah.
To make that in between, I guess.
What is one tip you can share to help the listeners be more inclusive today? So just something everybody can start doing today to be more inclusive.
Sorry, I missed the first part. What was the...
What is one tip that you can share to help the listeners be more inclusive?
I mean, it's really going back to just accepting. Really, just accept for whatever comes through the door. No judgment. Don't feel like you need to give your 3 cents. Don't feel like you need to give input. Don't feel like you need to be like, oh, well, what are you feeding your kid? Or what did you do? Or, even the question, and I'm sure you get this question all the time, is, well, how did they sleep last night? Like, that drives me crazy. It's like, well, do you know that my kid is autistic? We didn't sleep well. It didn't work out well. Right. Or even if they did sleep well, like, why are you asking me that question? It could have been the fact that the sky is blue, that today is not going so great. Mm-hmm. Like, right. That has nothing to do. It's just like all of the comments, just keep them to yourself and just smile and just accept us and just be inclusive. And if my kid is running around like a crazy person, please don't tell me they're going to sleep well tonight. Like, my husband knows, he laughs whenever anyone says they're going to sleep well tonight, Or what's the other one that drives me crazy? If he was here, he would look at me and say, I can't believe you can't think of it right now. Oh, you have your hands full. That's it. If someone says to me, it looks like you have your hands full, I think like I shoot daggers at them through my eyeballs, because it's like, yes, thank you very much. I'm clearly unaware that I seem to be struggling right now.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, I guess inclusion and acceptance go hand in hand.
Yeah, for sure. Where's the best place for everybody to connect with you?
You can definitely connect with me on Instagram at Connection Therapy Clinic. I am always on there. I am very responsive. You will see me crying on there many times. Talk about my son and his school, his IEP. We're currently in the midst of some schooling challenges. His principal, who used to be his biggest advocate, is currently leaving his school. So I'm now in this like tumultuous, what are we going to do next year situation. It's very character building. So you'll see me talk about that. We talk about OT, we talk about speech, all the things, inclusion. So please come follow me, and you'll hear about all the other things that we got, as well as the parent coaching and stuff.
Awesome. Ready for the last question?
I am.
Do you like Spam lunch meat, yes or no?
I do not.
Okay. Yeah, I live in Austin, Minnesota, where they make it and where the Spam Museum is located, so I ask all my guests just to see.
My grandfather loved it. He lived off of it, but he's a World War II veteran, so...
Yeah, makes sense.
No, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. To those listening, thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. It is truly an honor. Please join the podcast newsletter by clicking on the link in the episode description to keep up with the latest episode. Together we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.